All right. Well, thanks, Jim. Thanks for hosting. It's great to share some of the information that I've learned over the years about mountain lions. So this presentation is kind of a combination of natural history and what it takes to make a film, basically, about cats. You'll hear a little more about that from Brad Orsted. Also, kind of couples with Dan Saylor's presentation, and you'll get a little more view about what I'm doing out here and trying to follow these cats and learn about them as I go. So let's get started. There's a whole lot of people to thank and that don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but let's just say I don't do it myself for sure. And what does it take to make a film or study these cats? We've got to get up into the high country. This is some pretty rugged terrain, and it's best to track them when you can, which is in the winter. There's a lot of challenges to following cats and learning about them. And lately I've been trying to put the camera on myself as well as the cats, record a little audio, and just try to figure out what they're doing. But it is very physically demanding.
For me, and I'm pretty excited about that. So, well, it's doable. I guess.
For those of you that spent time in a winter environment, there's a lot of challenges with the cold, but also slipping, ice. There's a lot of different things, and cats don't use the best of trails, to say the least. They really challenge everybody physically, and I started the project basically to get in shape. I have done that, but so wherever the cats go, I need to follow. And to put up camera gear, sometimes I got to face the elements. And this day in particular was about wind chill somewhere around 20 below, I would say. And it was sleeting. I did put a camera up. It got success there. But it is an interesting animal. So if we were to look for cats, you've got to know a lot of things about them. For one, they like to use the most rugged terrain, and they like to be in cover all the time. So if you take a look at this picture on the upper left, these bushes might be a good place for cats to hang out or to prowl or to stalk. In this picture here, maybe not on this open countryside, but up here in the mountains behind, in these drainages, in the wooded drainages, in the cover, following these corridors, looking for their prey. Also, right along this cliff face in the lower left here, some of you might recognize this as Mount Everett's. Really good cat country up in the high country of Yellowstone. These bushes did reveal a dead deer. They love to hide their prey in areas like this. You really got to get in and look for the clues. So for a little while, I'll spend a little time going through what those clues are, what we're looking for. Before that, just want to also address what Dan was talking about earlier. The park does have a cougar project. Well, they have a wolf project too. This is Tony Ruth, who did a lot of the research on some of the cougar research in the park. And it focuses primarily in this northern range, the northern part of Yellowstone. But the northern range, the rangeland, the lowest elevation of this area of this ecosystem extends beyond the park borders. And though some of the footage you'll see is coming from inside the park, the primary footage is coming from outside the park on private land, where I set up several cameras. And then the research of the park is going on inside the park. So it's a nice combination of putting the two together. I don't do a lot of formal research. So what you'll see is more of what I've learned and some video that captures some of the moments, some of those little known things and little seldom seen things. So to get footage, I do have to go into the backcountry, as I said, and try to pay attention to everything around me. Here's a little clip where the day before we walked up this trail to the right to put cameras on that dead elk I had mentioned, or will mention soon. And we got the camera in the back, and well, I went in the next day and found that we had missed something.
So what I did is I set the camera right up here behind me. And I think that distracted us. So as we walked by the camera, we didn't realize it, but right here are the big cat tracks. Right there.
So it's easy to miss the cats, but shouldn't have been that easy. So finding a set of tracks like that is great. So we set out to follow them as best we can, either forward or backward, whichever we feel is the best or safest, and try to learn about them, which means getting into the brush. It means getting down there, getting wet, getting dirty, trying anything we can to find them.
Here's his tracks right here, and those are mine from yesterday.
So this cat basically stepped right in my footprints.
Oh, there's a nice print. So again, what makes it a tom is the big, wide toes, big print to begin with. This thing's probably close to 4 inches long and almost as wide. Wolf prints would be much longer, it'd have claws. This is an amazing print right here, especially considering it's snowing. Found a big boy this time.
So in contrast, these are female prints. Their prints are going to have toes that are a little narrower, a little longer. They're going to look more like teardrop shapes compared to the males who look more like thumbprints. So there's subtle differences. What's really nice about cat tracks and very useful is that the males and females can be told apart. And then if you look at size and do some measurements, you can tell young from adults. So you can tell sex and age categories just by finding a couple of really nice tracks. And that yields a lot of information that isn't quite as useful trying to do that with a wolf or a bear sometimes. You're just taking your best guesses. So here, for example, are a couple of tracks, and just take a look at the differences here. I get a lot of questions. I'm sure Jim Halfpenny does too, because he has this track center and gets all these track questions about the difference between canines and felines. Well, on your left, we have a wolf print, and on the right, a cougar print. On the left, you'll see some differences from that track on the right. Just point some of these out. Many of you know that dogs have claws that show imprints. Cats do not always have claws that show imprints, but they will show if they're slipping, if they're turning, if they're on a hillside, and a lot of times in snow and ice, you'll find claw marks, but very commonly in wolf prints, dog prints. Wild canines have more of an oval shape to their print. They're a long, lean animal. It's reflected in their shape of their toes and their feet. Cats are round, very round overall shape. This cat also does not have symmetry. It has a big toe, it has a little toe. Whereas in a dog, you have, if you could toe a line right through the middle of this print, you would have symmetry. Both the right and left side of this print looks the same. These two toes are about the same. These two are about the same. They're almost the same distance forward. On a cat, this toe is forward, this one is back in this particular print. Lots of asymmetry. There's differences in the interdigital pad. In a wolf, it's sort of a rounded triangle. In a cat, there's actually 2 lobes. Not quite see them here in this print, so it really goes more of a rounded 2-lobe type of presentation in the front versus one rounded spot in the front of a dog. So with a dog, you can make an X a lot of times between pads, not touch any. You can't do it with a cat because it doesn't have the symmetry. Those are some clues. Size is another clue. We've got bobcats and lynx occasionally in the park. So we've got to go big here, 3-4 inches in size. And same with a wolf, go big. So it's one of those differences. There's also differences in the gait pattern. Cats are stalkers, they're ambushers. They need balance, they need width and stability to do so. Our wild canines, especially our wolves, are fast, they're fleeting. They can trot for long distances. They can literally trot for hours. An animal that does that typically may have a narrow gait. It's built for more speed. Here is a wolf print, for example. If we move this ruler over, we could touch every print because the left print here isn't much further left than the right print. They're very, very narrow and streamlined animals. But a cat, being an ambush predator, a stalking predator, is very wide. We have left side, right side, left side, right side. Okay. Same here, right, left, right, left. These are in ski tracks, 2 ski tracks for those that have skied. Get an idea of size and scale there. So we're putting these clues together. With these cats, with this wide stance, they can stop at a moment's notice and they won't fall over. They don't have to continue to put another foot down to get balance. And then they can do these minor adjustments so they can pounce and change directions. They want to be quiet, ambush predators. A wide stance gives them the stability to do so. Well, there's other clues. Here's a cat. Sorry about this if you're eating something right now, but cats do have to go to the bathroom. If this was a house cat, it would probably bury its poop. Well, let's just take a look and see if this is would make a good house cat or not. Oh, bad kitty. Yes, mountain lions will sometimes bury their scat or poop, feces. There's lots of names for it. I won't utter one or two of them here, but they don't always do so. I found in my tracking that a lot of the males don't tend to cover it. I've had some kittens that not cover it, but typically it's in a cat habitat. It's underneath a big tree like this. It's in a dirty or maybe a bunch of needles, something to make a natural litter box in slight cover. Here's another one. This was in a sort of a little cave. Again, it's where a cat would go. Wild canines, though a wolf would be similar in size, will go along a trail and go wherever they're going. They're pretty noticeable. Where cats, you've got to kind of dig in there and go for it. So they're going to be where other cats can find them and use them, mark territory, other things, but not necessarily where anybody else is going to be looking for them, except maybe someone like myself. So these are a couple of different poops here. This gives you a scale. This is a sort of an average human hand glove. They didn't eat the human and leave the glove behind. It's just used for scale. Cat poop is very dry and segmented. So if this were on a trail, I would start to look a little closer and question, especially this one. It's breaking apart a lot. As those of you who own cats, older cats have trouble with urinary tract infections, kidney problems, all kinds of problems with the fact that they absorb moisture a lot more and differently than we do. They need a lot of water, and older cats have problems with kidney failure and other things. And that's reflected in the dry scat. Here's a chunk of bone. So these are big, these are hidden somewhat, sometimes buried in cat country. The other thing they do is they do urinate, but unlike a house cat, they don't bury it after they're done. They actually dig with their back feet as they're urinating. It forms a mound like this and a couple of divots, almost like pits. So this is called a scrape. So they're scraping as they go. It leaves the urine deposited on this duffy mound where cats can smell it from distances. There has been some research done on these, and in areas where cats come in where there have been scrapes that have been used routinely, because again, this can be a territorial marking, that the cats will, I think it was like 80% of the time, use the visual clue of this mound and possibly the divots to go to those scrapes and then sniff them and maybe remark them. So it isn't just olfactory, it isn't just scent that they're using sight as well to find these. So we like to find these, and because of the two little troughs or big troughs from their big paws, they're set themselves out from, say, a squirrel or other things that might be digging. The other thing I can look for is drag marks. This elk in particular was killed by a young tom and dragged a long ways down the hill. So it roughly at about 200 yards. About 200 yards down this hill to bury it in the deep snow. Here is the rumen, or the undigested plant material from inside the elk. This is a pile of snow here and here where it was buried. Well, and Dan alluded to this. There's a lot of interactions, these carcasses. Wolves came later, unburied it, ate most of it, and here is that bull elk wrapped up against a tree. So this, to me, is a gold mine to find this stuff, learn from it, and get in here when bears aren't out to increase the safety that way. And I'll show you setting up some cameras on an elk in a minute. Here's another drag mark. I think this one also was about 200 yards. It was a female trying, I think, to get this in the most cover she could because she had 2 kittens. Here's a pile. These cats will use hair, grass, snow. You can see scratch marks, whatever they can to bury this, to keep it secret. Keep it secret, keep it safe, the Lord of the Rings thing. This is the hoof sticking out. Here they use the fur from the animal. I'll show you a few clips of cats using some of this fur later on. So I find all these things, and these are the signs that we look for. Brief thing here about setting up equipment. Dan mentioned game cameras are important. I have created a lot of rigs because cats are out at night. The winter depletes batteries. I'm trying to do a film for television, so I got to have a little higher quality. So I make these wooden boxes, special camera cases, battery cases. Here's the little lights, a little camera, the GoPros. Used to use those a lot. This is a carcass. I had to crawl in and set these up. I think you'll see a little clip from this later on. But it's all custom made gear. I am trying to learn about these animals as much as get the footage. And so here's that elk that I mentioned. And I'm putting up lights, cameras, everything on this. The weather is not always perfect in Yellowstone's winters, as you can imagine. So it takes a fair amount of effort. All these fine equipment. There's a lot of gloves off in the cold, even working at night. This stuff that Brad Orsted does a fair amount as well. You'll hear from him later. But this is how some of the footage comes that you see from these cats. And other people all across the country are using game cameras like this one. Those are my scouting cameras. And it's revealing a lot of the distribution of these cats, or redistribution, as they seem to, as Jim had mentioned, there's a lot of stories about cats with those game cameras, and now revealing where those cats truly are versus the, I think you heard the story about a red fox. Speaking of red fox, here's some clips that I got on that very setup later on. The lighting's off because this is infrared. I haven't tweaked it to do black and white or anything. You'll see different lightings here. This is not an Arctic fox. This is actually a fox in February, grabbing a little souvenir, perhaps to court a female. Here's a few more fox that come in. One of the things that I've learned a lot about these setups is that many species are utilizing these cameras or these carcasses. So one of the things that I've approached a college professor with is getting some research on the other species that are utilizing cougar kills. It's definitely a different complement of species than are using the wolf kills that are a lot of times in the open more. They can be, well, I'd call them rather messy. These are hidden and hard to find. So definitely a slightly different complement of food availability, and also, I guess, in the cougar's mind, thievery or utilization of these carcasses that the cougars risk their lives sometimes to kill. Another thing that Jim will talk about here very soon after this, and this is a kind of a lead into that, is a little bit of human safety. You can see bear spray. There's two of us here. This is maybe not my best view, but this is my wife, Carolyn, who's worked on some of this presentation, does a lot of stuff with me as well. We just put up a camera over here on the left, and this camera, the game camera, got the best footage on this case. Cougar was using a scrape over here. You'll see footage of that later. But here is us leaving this scene. You see there's a little game trail here that we take out. And the next clip is a few minutes later. This is what came after. Nose to the ground, and this cat, we believe, followed us a fair ways out, and then came back about a minute later through the scene again. It checked out everywhere I had walked. So there's always a human safety thing with what we're doing. You know, we're also trying to bear in mind that these cougars have a life, and try not to intrude upon them. I know I backed down when I found hurt cats and when I found little kittens that are vulnerable and not gotten any footage for the safety of the cats as well. Jim will get into that a lot more, so I'm going to skip back to some of the other things. And I'm going to skip this clip, but we go back into the woods and get all this footage. And then there's the research part of it, and then there's the hard work. So in this case, I just put up a bunch of cameras going back for weeks on this one scene, and I'm going to go back and look at some of the footage afterwards.
Time to go look at the footage, see if we did get him come through. Oh boy, this is frustrating. Go back to the drawing board.
Sometimes we have to go through hours and hours of footage at night because the camera, some of them are on motion sensors, others just set up. So imagine trying to fast forward through 12 hours of footage or more, and several different cameras. So it's a lot of work, and I know Dan does a lot of work with the research too, of getting some of those numbers crashed.
Anything. Oh yes, yes, yes! This camera's getting it. Oh yeah.
You can see I got two cats here. I always have a little assistant, it seems. So in this case, this is a quick story about the first time I set up a camera. This arrow highlights the camera strap, and we spent about 45 minutes putting this camera in. There was a carcass way off to the right. And I was very careful, not knowing much about cats, trying to not leave much of a scent. I had practiced putting this camera rig up beforehand. Went in, figured it'd take about 10 minutes. It took 45. I think it took an hour and a half to get out of there. We're very worried about leaving our scent in the area or any disturbance. But if I remove the arrow, you might see a tail and the belly of the cat, who decided that all of the disturbed dirt what we created to put the camera in made a good bed the next day. So even though these cats will check out our equipment once, other animals will check it out, it's not, they're a little curious about it. This cat went right over the top of the camera the next day. I got this footage from a few feet away. So they don't seem to mind too much with the cameras. We do try to, again, limit what we do. Other animals check it out. That's a fox. So to get a good film in the research, I put up several cameras to give you several angles. We're used to that in movies. So there's a camera here, camera there, cat here. And that cat was sniffing a scrape. You'll see that footage from the other angle later in the presentation. Not any of these cameras. So some cats have chewed on things. Elk and bears have definitely chewed up on things and destroyed some of the gear that I have. But cats don't seem to mind too much. Here's some more animals that we're getting on carcasses. Some of you may recognize the black-billed magpie on a deer. We definitely get a lot of different species, particularly when the carcass has been either not buried, as some cats seem to kill, eat a little, and leave. And particularly find that more with some of the toms. But also when it's later in stages of consumption where the cat doesn't seem to mind even burying it, not even take the time to do that and just move on. So here's a cutie, a pine marten. Again, the thick forest. This is not something you'd find on too many wolf kills out in the open, but you would find on a lot of cat kills around here. You find a lot of mice, a lot of different species utilizing them. So a little bit of natural history here blended in with this presentation. Here is a female that is moving through the landscape. We set up some cameras on her travel route, hoping to catch her. Dan had mentioned there's a peak of birds in the summer. All the footage you're going to see of kittens has been taken in the winter. These kittens were born in the fall. There's a cute little fat polka dotted kitten with blue eyes. I work mostly out of the park in some of the northern range areas where there's a little bit of less snow than further into the park. But there's a huge concentration of ungulates migrating out of this park in the winter, provides a good food source for these kittens. Here is a kitten, probably one of that same kitten a month or so later, checking out the camera gear. So there is another smaller peak of birthing takes place in the fall, and the kittens then are growing up during this huge food available time. She usually will make a kill, was about gone and moved to another site. It's a pretty quick transition for milk, doesn't take long, just in a couple months they're up and moving with mom. We found kitten tracks that weren't much bigger than a big tom house cat out as she was moving 4 kittens one time, the one female. So they'll move them quickly, and then the kittens are left behind, I guess, to learn the ropes. You can see this one's attacking the head, just like we naturally would to kill. Dan went into a couple things about how they kill, so I'll try to cover some gaps here. These kittens will continue to travel with mom, and be stashed, and then after a few months, they'll start to, as you'll see here, go with mom and not be left behind, but actually keep going with her, hunt with her. This is mom here and a kitten that's already fairly good sized, several months old. And you can see it's not quite as big as mom, but checking out the dirt. This is a scrape site that they're sniffing, trying to get some information from. They learn the ropes of how to hunt. They learn all these smells and sounds in the area they're living in. A lot of information. They have a short time to do that, longer than some animals, but definitely within a year and a half, there's a lot of information they need to take in, or they risk a lot of things traveling once they disperse. So mom had left a long time before this, and the youngsters just continue to smell that scrape. I've seen this before where I suppose they've got a lot more to learn and a lot more to take in, and she can filter through what she needs to know quickly from those smells. And these two are actually quite playful with each other. So can I get this out of here? How do I do that? There. So here's a latrine, not too far from that kill site that these animals were using. Some of the scat was not buried, and they used it several times. When the kittens get a little bit older, then they tend to be kicked out. Dan mentioned these young males go a lot further. They try to find to fill in gaps. This is one such young male here. There's something a little bit interesting about this. And he's missing the tip of his tail, the tip of a cat tail. A lot of times that's what people see when they're not sure if it's a deer running through and they get a brief glimpse. They get a lot of reports, but it had this long tail. Well, that long tail usually has a dark end to it. This could have been frostbit. This cat spends a lot of time in wet areas, along streams, could have been bit. I'm not going to come to any conclusions for sure, but it helped us identify this young male gone along with his tracks. He's got a deer in here that he has killed. And these males are very cautious. When I watch the clips of them, they're always looking around, checking things out, investigating, and being very careful. They have a lot to risk. Big toms are usually one of the main things that they have to worry about, killing them as they're trying to find those gaps. Several females make up one male's territory. You think about the math, and where do the other males go? They have to simply find a way to survive until they get big enough to compete. And some of them don't have that luxury. They starve, they get killed by other males. So it's a tough life for these males. Here's that same young male checking out. A female had laid down in here. She actually left a pile of urine in this duff, and she probably left some scent on the different twigs all around. So he's taking his time. He's checking it all out. Again, they can mate all year. This young male is big enough that he might be approaching her for mating season or just checking out other cats in his area. Very curious. Also, these young males may tend to be in an area they didn't grow up in. There's a lot more things to investigate. This young one had actually killed 2 deer in this brush pile, and every time it came back in, it sniffed all over that carcass before it actually consumed any of it. I had cameras on this, sometimes 24/7, didn't see other critters on this carcass much at all, and yet this male was still extremely cautious before it started to consume a carcass that it knew quite well. I did not have any scent on where it was sniffing, not directly anyway. So again, these behaviors that the cameras are revealing are some of the things that other methods don't reveal. We don't know a lot about some of these behavioral things. What we do know is that cats have very sharp teeth, modified for shearing fur right off of these carcasses. You can see that it's plucking, basically, well, shearing these off, and they'll use this fur to recover these carcasses so they're harder to find. It protects them from the smell wafting out to other scavengers out there. Here's a close-up of this cat putting this hide back in its carnassials, the ancient carnivore teeth that allows them to bite really hard and also shear some of that off. So these cats have very strong bite. You can see it actually crunching through the leg bones as it's getting near the end of the use of this carcass. These carcasses, when they're done, are quite clean. There's not much left at all, just a pile of bones. It looks almost like a museum specimen. Another thing these cats have is a very coarse tongue, like sandpaper. If you've ever been licked by a house cat, you might be surprised how rough it is. And that is another tool they use to get as much as they can off of these carcasses. Now, in shearing all of that hair, there can be problems associated with that. Anybody has a house cat might recognize some of these sounds, just amplified. So that answers the question if wild cats cough up fur balls. Indeed they do. Another way of keeping things hidden, these cats try to avoid anything being detected. Now there's no sound with this clip. I'll put some sound in later on to mimic what this cat's doing. This was shot across the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone near Tower. These magpies for 2 days just kept harassing this cat. The cat had killed a bighorn sheep. Here's part of it here. And all day long, these magpies kept harassing it for both days. The cat's going to vocalize. It's going to kick them off. Cats try to be secretive. These birds are drawing attention to a carcass the cat wants to hide. It's not like this mountain lion is going to make a great meal out of a magpie, but magpies are annoying. They're like mosquitoes to us, I think, and this cat's doing everything it can to keep wolves and bears from finding its meal. And there's only one time this cat was quiet. I'll get into that at the end of the presentation, but them magpies were very persistent. And some of the last little footage here is about how cats find each other for the mating season. A few more clips. We'll open up to questions. This is a female cat going through an area. You'll see she's sniffing around. She's going to go to the bathroom without scraping at all. I've not seen this very often. In fact, that's something I'd like to ask Dan if he's got on his Kobe and his cameras. But this is not long after. Exact same spot. This is a young male, perhaps that young male I filmed before. This is that response, and I saw some questions on it. This is called the Fleming or Fleming response. This animal has opened up its mouth. There's an organ called the Jacobson's organ. Near the roof of its mouth, it inhales a lot of air through that organ, and it can detect pheromones. Probably tell not only it's a female, if that female's in heat, if it's a male, a lot of information. A lot of mammals have this. You might see it in the elk rut in the fall. In particular, around here is a very noticeable response. African lions, you might have seen pictures of that with their other teeth showing. Instead of an angry lion, that's basically a lion who's, well, a horny lion. Let's just call it that. So that's that we see a lot with these animals. Here again, a lot of sniffing. Here's that mound that may have drawn its attention, this cat's attention. This is a female, or actually this is a male. There you can see it's scraping, it's peeing out the front. You see the testicles a little bit. It is hard to sex these cats. A lot of times the sexual organs don't show on a male as noticeable, or you don't get the angle. You can sometimes tell by where the urine comes out if it's a male or a female. This one, could tell by the tracks. I could tell by where the urine comes out that it's a male, and it's very cautious. It's going to scrape 2 different places along here, and again, take its time. This, shortly after, is the female. Now, I almost goofed this up in the first presentation to put it together because I just assumed the male would come in after the female and follow her. In this case, it was opposite. The male came in first, the female followed. Here's a female peeing and sniffing out the same mound, going similar to where the male did. I'm going to zip a little further forward. You can tell by where the urine comes out that it's a female, and the vocalization. So during the mating season, during the time in which she comes into estrus once a month, she's a very vocal cat. She blows away all those rules about being quiet during that time. And this is a sound that's been described as a woman being murdered, 911 calls. There's all kinds of rumors and reports associated with that, the different vocalizations. At the same time as she is marking her territory, she's vocal, she's being visual, olfactory clues, scent clues, all kinds of things she's doing to try to attract attention to the male. And it may not just be the male in the area, it may draw in other males, because that vocalization, the louder ones, can carry for a long ways. Here's a different one, a few different sounds here.
Brad, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Jim. So that vocalization, I've heard something similar to for a female to call in kittens. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily a mating call as much as a call to other cats, but it could be leading into the louder sounds that some of these cats make. Here's a male checking that same area out as she was calling from in the first part of the last clip. Again, very curious. These are things that if we were to track this cat, we could see it stopped here, but we wouldn't know if it was just looking around, checking out the area, if we didn't have the video footage to go with it. So I have a feeling as we track cats, they're actually sniffing a few things that we don't otherwise know. And when we can tell when they stop and look around. But I'm finding there's a lot of the sense of smell is important for these cats. So as this goes on, then these males will travel great distances throughout their territories. Curious what Brad might say, and the other Brad might say on this, but I find that males don't stick around kills very long. They make a kill and move on. They're covering a lot of ground, a lot of female territories, potentially to mate and to defend or mark that territory repeatedly so other males don't move in. This male definitely seemed to purposely scratch that twig, and it comes back and does it again. And I had no idea of this. It looked like the cat just walked through here. And then after that, it's going to go to the bathroom. I put a couple clips together. I forgot I had that at the end of the clip, so I got that kind of prematurely. But these females have a lot of strange vocalizations, and apparently, just so you're not confused, you've heard of Gibbon Falls, and there must be some primates in Yellowstone, according to that clip. I borrowed that one off the internet, and I think we've got some primates or something in the background. So the males, if persistent pays off, and they'll finally find these females. Here's the female, the male following, and stay with them, mate many, many times. She may continue to caterwaul during this time. Other males might move in. So it's a very interesting time frame for them. Jim's going to get into this a little bit, but just going to show you that some of these cats will use human landscapes. This is inside a really old human structure, and there's a scrape in there. There's the Fleming response. And Jim will get a little bit about that. It's a very interesting area of study, but also a lot of controversy surrounding cats in human environments. 2 more clips left, and I'll open it up to questions. Here's one of my favorites. You can listen to some of the vocalizations, hopefully. This is a young male inside a dead deer. There's a few vocalizations. You see the ears back, and I'll let this clip kind of speak for itself. We don't know a lot about interactions between cats and social dynamics. So this is a female that came in with a male. I don't know who made the kill on this, but she'll move her way in a little bit more. And you can see the big, strong legs on him and all the muscular on his head. She's a little thinner, Bill, which you won't see as good here, but there wasn't much left of this deer the next day. Now, whether this is a courting pair or not, I'm not sure. You see the difference in the paws. both a skinny build in the body, but not so much in the front with the male. Suffice to say, there wasn't much left after that tug of war. You can see the big muscular on the male. It's really difficult to tell males from females just from video clips, but there is definitely a much bigger, broader head, much bulkier front end on the male. But again, it's very difficult to tell. I can identify sometimes individuals by scarring like this female has on her ears. But male from female is tough. It's much easier in the tracks. One last clip to share with you as you get out and explore and maybe even look for some of these signs that I've talked about. Again, be a little cautious. Jim will get into that. But, you know, always be aware of your surroundings. Look around you. This person is very enthused about taking pictures and seeing the scenery. And this is about 50 feet below. There's the cat. There's a dead sheep that had killed. This is the only time that cat didn't move. And that's the one that was being harassed by magpies. And that was the only time that cat did not move during the 2 days is when the people came by. So again, very secretive, very cautious. Very quickly, I'll open it up to questions. I did want to mention I am writing a book. It's just about finished. Here's sort of the abbreviated cover I might use. About the Grand Lady of Yellowstone, Other Wolf Stories, kind of a little shameless advertisement here. This is 472. And a lot of stories going on in that book. Hoping to get some more stuff out about cougars as well. But with that, I will open it up to any questions that you might have.
Jim, you're
Shauna,
not. Oh, there you are.
Time for one or two quick questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple. I'm going to let Garrett take the first one, and then I'll jump in on this other one.
Thanks, Brad. That was great. We had a question posed in the chat. When females go into estrus, do they always show behavior to attract males, or only if they want to mate? And if not, what theories might explain when they choose to attract a mate?
We know we have a lot of information on captive cats, but until we got some of these game cameras and all this other video, we don't have a lot of information on what goes on out there. Most animals in the wild, and Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but when they have the opportunity to mate, they will take advantage of it. I would make the assumption that when a female cat comes into estrus, as long as she feels she's in a somewhat of a safe environment, she'll be vocalizing, she'll be attracting that attention because it's to the survival of the species that they need to pass on their genes. So I would think maybe in a stressed environment, like in an urban setting or a lot of wolf activity nearby, that might change. Those might be some triggers, but I'm just taking our best guesses because it's information we don't necessarily have the luxury to have access to.
All right, and then we had another question, Brad. Thank you for sharing that footage. It was fun to see some of those days when we've been out there traipsing around the woods. That was great. What do you typically do to limit your own scent when investigating these areas, or is there nothing that can actually be done? Are they going to be able to pick up on you anyway?
If I were to work with wolves, bears, that scent does seem to matter. We get very few little footage of wolves, except on cameras that have been out a long time. They're very, very cautious around them. Elk are very curious. Bears have destroyed my equipment more than once. I had a bear cub take a camera and play with it like a ball, playground ball. But the cats, again, they don't seem to mind too much. Every once in a while, they'll sniff a camera and move on, and then life goes on. They're curious about something new in their environment. So honestly, we don't take a lot of precautions to cut down on our scent. Maybe I'd get a little more footage if I did so, but it seems like the cats come right in the next day. It's good to know that. It's allowed me a lot more flexibility. That being said, if I were going to do a lot more heavy science versus just collect footage, I think I'd want to be a little more careful about that. But leaving cameras out for quite a while cuts down on your own scent anyway, and visiting only as often as you have to. There's very little else I can do. I do not try to, have food scents on my camera equipment, keep it out of the kitchen and all that, and outside, even leave it outside a little longer from time to time. Hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you very much, Brad. We'll give everybody a few minutes here to hit their bathrooms. And coming up, I guess I'm up next, and I'll be talking about human mountain lion interactions. So please join us again at 11 o'clock. And let's see here. There we go. We'll see everybody back here at 11 o'clock with human confrontations across the United States.